If you wanted to do one thing for Aboriginals in this country that wasn't symbolic but was a real thing, was actually all that land that is tied up under native title is take it back to freehold and let the Aboriginals manage it, as they see fit. That would be the most, well, maybe not the most, but certainly a very practical thing to do, and empower them.
I'm Topher Field. My guest today is Senator Gerard Rennick. We're talking about The Voice, the campaign to pay the rent, change the date, and so much more. If this is the sort of content that you enjoy, then please make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment, and head on over to topherfield.net where you can join my email list. Now here's Senator Rennick. Well, Senator Gerard Rennick, thank you so much for taking some time out of your very busy schedule to talk to me today. I always appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Topher. It's good to be here.
Now, I have to say, this is my opinion, not yours. Please contradict me if you disagree. But it seems to me as though the Voice campaign, this campaign to have the voice enshrined in the Constitution through a referendum, seems to be stumbling slightly at the moment. An example from down here in Melbourne, you're in Queensland, of course, so you may not be aware of this. The Invasion Day, that's the one, the Invasion Day rally that was held down here in Melbourne, they actually had huge signs up saying vote no to the Voice and saying no voice without treaty. So they want to push it further down the line and do some other things first. You're on the record saying that you don't believe the Voice is the right way forward. What are your concerns with it?
Well, I think it sort of violates the principle of democracy and that we're all, created equal. I mean, the whole point of democracy is that, we're all equal and everyone gets one vote and has a voice. And at this stage, we have a voice. It's called the ballot box. And there's an entire department allocated towards Aboriginal affairs. There's a Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. Yep. I mean, he can, in terms of the Voice being a so-called advisory body, he's already got advisors. Why do you need to enshrine that in the Constitution? It's also worth noting Section 51(26) of the Constitution already allows the government to make laws in regards to race. The purpose of it's completely redundant, and my fear is that it will become a hammer looking for a nail. So it will create scenarios like we will never, the hatred and the guilt and the talking about the past will never stop. It's time we move forward. No one's denying that, tragedies occurred in the past. But, look, tragedies occurred in all countries with all races. I mean, so what's happened with Aboriginals in Australia isn't necessarily unique to Aboriginals in Australia. It's, you can pick your nationality, and at some point they were probably being persecuted by another nationality, throughout various stages throughout history, right? So the idea that we can wind back the clock and somehow make good on the past when we weren't even alive. It's just absurd.
Look, let me push back on you a little bit, because I have this conversation with a lot of people who do support the Voice or various other causes like that. And I can tell you already what they would be saying is that, yes, it may have happened in all cultures. That doesn't justify it here. And I actually agree on that particular point. But they would also be very quick to point out the differences in outcomes that we're seeing, particularly in more remote Indigenous communities. We know, for example, that Alice Springs has been in the news recently with just the sheer out-of-control violence that's going on there. But this is a problem happening especially in remote communities, but also amongst Indigenous communities within the cities as well. If you're opposed to something like the Voice, you consider it to be redundant. Do you have anything specific or anything that you would like to see happen that might actually help to improve the real world outcomes? Because there's not a single person that I know that wouldn't like to see those outcomes improve.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's, absolutely. And that is basically for governments to own and run infrastructure like they used to provide essential services to all regional communities. I mean, I'm from a regional community myself, and, my hometown lost its maternity ward. We lost our council. We didn't have poker machines 30 years ago when we had maternity wards in a council. Now we do. So, if you want to, improve the lives of people, is get them into work, step one. Get rid of the gambling machines. I mean, I have mixed opinions on alcohol. I mean, I don't mind a beer myself, but obviously, you can only, have that, the alcohol works when you've got a job. I mean, clearly, if you don't have any job, it's easier to just get into the habit of going from day to day. And that's not an Aboriginal issue. That's anyone. It's easy to fall into the spiral of drinking if you're not, haven't got a purpose in life. But, yeah, it's general improve the government services, full stop, regardless, in all areas. and all regions. I mean, this isn't. I mean, it is bad in Alice Springs, so let's not pretend it's not. But it's an issue that affects all regional communities, and as you say, many city areas as well. But this is not a race issue. This is a quality assurance issue, with the fact that we have inept governments who are more interested in regulating the individual and telling them what to do than actually serving the individual.
I want to come back to a comment you made in response to my first question around the sort of the redundancy and the symbolism and it potentially becoming a hammer looking for a nail. I'm just old enough to remember when the MABO decision was handed down, and that was hailed as this really seminal moment that was going to bring about a huge amount of healing and really help to bridge that gap for Indigenous communities. It conferred land rights conditionally to communities, and I've spoken to many Indigenous elders, particularly up along the Barker River, who expressed to me their complete frustration and disillusionment because despite that decision and despite on paper them having ownership of some of the water in the river and various other things, the reality is they're actually still not allowed to do anything with it. They can't make any sort of use of it or make any decisions about it. Fast forward, then we were told that an apology, a national apology, would be what would bridge the gap and help to close that gap. That apology came under Kevin Rudd, and yet we see these problems persisting. Why do we compare someone like Jacinta Price, who is very much on the ground and trying to draw attention to the very real problems that are being faced on the ground, with someone like a Lydia Thorpe, who's very focused on the symbolism, Australia Day, etc.? Why do we keep making these gestures, and how do we move out of gesture land and into the real world where we can actually have an impact on outcomes?
That's a good question, Topher. Well, and you made an excellent point with that MABO decision, because the MABO decision, and I'll stand to be corrected on this, but my understanding is that the Aboriginals get native title, but they don't get freehold title. So, and
Correct.
I was just thinking about this before. I mean, if you wanted to do one thing for Aboriginals in this country that wasn't symbolic but was a real thing, was actually all that land that is tied up under native title is taken back to freehold and let the Aboriginals manage it, as they see fit. That would be the most, well, maybe not the most, but certainly a very practical thing to do, and empower them. I mean, like I say, it's and like I said, I'm not with the ins and outs of the MABO decision per se, but that's my understanding of it as well, is that they get given native title, but it doesn't mean a lot because they can't use it in a way that would give them self-reliance and enable them to use the land so they can stand on their own 2 feet. I mean, that's what we want to see here, is that we want to empower individuals, including Aboriginal individuals, right? Like, it doesn't really matter what race they're from or what race we're talking about. The whole point of a democracy, in my view, is to empower the individual and restrain the authority of government. But because the government's got this land tied up in native title, it's there's still, the Aboriginals are still dependent on outside means, and they can't stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah, look, if we could start a campaign to really give actual ownership to the Indigenous people over this native title land, I would be right there with you. I think that would be a fantastic step forward. This is great coffee made easy. Now, while I tell you about it on this side of the screen, I'm going to show you how to make one on that side of the screen. Literally, you just have to add hot water, but don't be fooled. It's not instant coffee. This is organic, specialty-grade coffee that's been roasted and ground and packaged in nitrogen right here in Australia. It is some of the best coffee you'll ever have. Now, this is a filter-style coffee, which is great because it means it doesn't need any milk. You can add milk if you want, but it doesn't need milk. So those of you that can't drink milk or don't like to drink as much milk, this is great for your gut, great for your health, great if you're on a keto diet as well. And you can make it absolutely anywhere. All you need is hot water. You could be on a work site, you could be camping, obviously at the office or in your home. You could even be on an aeroplane. All you need is for them to supply you with some hot water, and you can make yourself a brew coffee that is just as good as the one you'd be enjoying at home. There are people that drink brew every single morning. This has become their go-to coffee that's replaced the cafe coffees they used to pay for with their exorbitant prices and the long wait times. Brew comes in different pack sizes. You can get sample packs if you just want to check us out. You can get monthly subscription packs like this one that show up on your doorstep every month so you'll never run out of coffee again. Or you can buy in bulk if you have an office or a hotel or you drink a lot of coffee. BREW Australia is better for your health, it's better for your wallet, and it's better coffee. In fact, it's great coffee made easy. BrewAustralia.com. We just have a very short amount of time left. I want to touch on one other thing that's now come out of the woodwork, for me at least. I wasn't aware that there was a push for this, but suddenly it seems to be everywhere. This idea of pay the rent, this idea of financial reparations. Some people are saying 1% of income if you're a non-Indigenous person. To me, that seems like it's going to entrench an enormous amount of resentment. I can just see that leading to an absolute powder keg of resentment that would lead to some very, very poor outcomes. How do we combat these sorts of ideas? I mean, well, firstly, what's your position on an idea like that one?
Well, I mean, it's absurd. You know what I mean? Like, you know, at least with the MABO native title is that, you know, the land the Aboriginals are given, they can work the land, right? I mean, there's a lot of logic in that decision, but
in theory, yes.
In theory, yeah. But this one is just like, well, you know, it's nothing more. And I mean, this is the problem too with a lot of this. You know, this is identity politics, virtue signalling, dressed up identity politics. You know, wrapped up in virtue signalling, but it's actually communism in disguise. Whereby they're trying to take property off people. And I've said that in a couple of my Facebook posts. I keep mentioning the word property rights. I mean, the voice, if it gets up, will eventually head towards property rights. They will be heading towards treaty. They will be heading towards compensation. Yep. And look, one thing with MABO is that you get the land, and this is why I'd much rather freehold, get the land, stand on your own 2 feet. And if you're busy enough working the land, and if you know, true, regardless of race, I mean, the best outcome is that people stand on their own 2 feet, get the Aboriginal standing on their own 2 feet so they're not looking, or you know, and when I say Aboriginals, the Aboriginal lobby group, it's not all Aboriginals.
Correct.
You know, instead of sort of looking, you know, there's this constant sort of threat of, well, we're going to hate you forever unless you give us what we want. Well, you know, that's not emotional. That sort of emotional blackmail is just not constructive for anyone.
Yeah, look, that's all we've got time for, but I'm going to touch very, very quickly. If we do see something like a pay the rent, what we're doing is creating a financial incentive for someone to be classified as an Indigenous Australian, as an Aboriginal Australian. And of course, Andrew Bolt was sued for hate speech for daring to raise the question of how do we know? How do we decide? What's the criteria? And even talking about that was cause for a lawsuit only a few years ago, and yet that's going to become a very relevant question if any of these ideas get up. Senator Gerard Rennick, thank you. Sorry?
But that's the thing. Like, at what point when did Aboriginals get here as well? This is the other thing. I mean, were they, you know, which Aboriginals can trace their roots back 20,000 years versus those that trace their roots back 800 years? I mean, where do you go back? How far back do we go here? I mean, yeah, it's you can't answer that question, but it's sort of stuff that just
there's a lot of. While we're on rhetorical questions, the question that I ask is, when do I get to call any land my own? England's not my land. Ireland's not my land. My parents have been here on both sides of my family for 5 generations.
Yeah.
At what point have I earned the right to call this my land? But again, that's a question that you're not allowed to ask. So before we get ourselves cancelled, Senator, I'm going to call that a day for today. But look, I look forward to having you on again, and we'll see how all of this voice business unfolds in coming weeks and months. Thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Thanks, Topher. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm Topher Field, and I wouldn't be able to do this without the help of my incredible supporters. So go to topherfield.net, scroll down a little bit, and you'll see there's a couple of different ways you can support me and help me to do more of this sort of work. You can buy some merchandise, you can give a one-off donation by buying me a coffee through PayPal, or you can jump onto my Subscribe Star and become an ongoing supporter. All of those links are available at topherfield.net. And don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, and make sure you join my email list as well so that I can still keep in touch with you even when I do inevitably get cancelled. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.